Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Political Hitman. I'm Howie Silverger, your political hitman, here on Israel News Talk Radio. Welcome to the program. You could join me in the chat room by going to israelnewstalkradio.com and clicking on that button that says Listen Live Chat Room. In the chat room, there is always great conversation in the chat room. Sometimes it relates to what we're talking about on the show. But join me in the chat room. I'm there the entire show on israelnewstalkradio.com. You could call in because the show is live. In North America, the number is 301-768-4841. In Israel, the number is 02-6500-151. And I have to tell you that a couple of weeks ago we were talking about Nick Cannon and these horrible statements he made. These horrific statements he made about Jews. Nick Cannon is, of course, a presenter on an American game show. And these terrible things he said about Jews. Another actor came out and said some terrible things about Israel, and that was and he was a Jewish actor, and I'll tell you about him when we come back after news. I'm really starting to think that we're taking the words of celebrities a little too seriously. I'll explain it to you in much greater detail throughout the show, but I don't know why anybody cares about what a paid clown has to say about politics or a paid clown has to say about the existence of the state of Israel. Why is this relevant at all? I want to talk about the relevancy, and of course, is this relevant? Probably not. And does this violate the 10 Commandments? We're going to go back there too. Don't forget to call in. The numbers are on the top of the page on israelnewstalkradio.com. You can join me in the chat room on israelnewstalkradio.com by clicking on that button that says Listen Live in Chat Room. I'll give you numbers in North America, 301-768-4841. The numbers in Israel are 02-6500-151. Join in on the conversation. My name is Howie Silverger. This is Political Hitman. We are live right here on israelnewstalkradio.com. I'd love for you to join us. Stay tuned. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes.
Always challenging the status quo. Hello, I'm Rod Bryant on Beyond the Matrix here at IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. I want to encourage you to listen each week, every Wednesday at the same time, for an amazing show that will challenge you, inform you, and inspire. News, views, and wisdom for the nations here on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. Don't forget, Beyond the Matrix every week, Wednesday, here on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com.
Political Hitman. I'm Howie Silverger, your political hitman here on Israel News Talk Radio. Thank you so much for tuning in. You could join me in the chat room by going to IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com and clicking on that chat room button on the top of the page. It says Listen Live Chat Room. You can be there and you could be in the conversation in the chat room. You could also call in. This is a call-in show. It is a talk show, so feel free to call in. Numbers in North America are 301-768-4841. In Israel, the number is 02-6500-151. Of course, I know that you didn't write those numbers down, but don't fret. Don't lose any sleep over it. The number's on the top of the page on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. So just go to IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com and you have all the numbers. You have everything you need right there on the top of the page. And today, I want to talk about celebrities. I don't like talking about celebrities. And I know people want me to talk about, and we'll get into maybe a little later in the show, about the Democratic nomination for President of the United States, someone named Kamala Harris. She's married to a Jewish guy, as if that's relevant. But we'll talk about that later on in the show because that kind of fits into everything we're talking about now. I wanted to start with Nick Cannon. I told you a couple of weeks ago about Nick Cannon and his hateful remarks he made about Jews on his podcast. And he was caught, and he was fired from one of his jobs, not from both of his jobs, just from one of his jobs, one of his major jobs. He was fired. And he decided after he got fired from his job that he would that he would change his opinion, and he would look into his racism and try to understand why the Jews were upset. So Nick Carter's on a mea culpa tour. That means that he's going around and he's trying to apologize to the Jewish community. And most recently, just a couple of days ago, he was being interviewed by the Allied Jewish community in the United States. It's one of the biggest Jewish community groups in the States. Now, I watched the interview. I watched the guy who interviewed him, and it wasn't a professional interviewer. It was probably some rich guy who donated a lot of money to the organization, and they said, "Oh, look, we have a celebrity. You can interview him," because the interview was horrible and didn't ask any relevant questions. Nick Cannon, on the other hand, was trying to get his message out, so he just kind of stepped over the other guy and just said whatever he wanted to. And it was really an odd interview. It was an odd statement. It was really odd. First, Nick Cannon said that Jews didn't understand what he was talking about when he said that Jews ruled the world, Jews, and Jewish bankers, and brought up all these anti-Jewish tropes. He said that Jews really, everyone took that out of context. It's not really what he meant. I can't imagine you would mean anything else when you say that Jews rule the world and we have to watch out for the Jews. But he says we didn't understand. Fine. You want to give the guy the benefit of the doubt? Give him the benefit of the doubt. And then he came out with this odd claim that his great-grandfather was a Spanish rabbi. It was really an odd thing. And I invite you to go and watch it. It's only about an hour, but it's truly the strangest and most surreal hour you will ever spend watching anything. You can find it online. Just type in Nick Cannon Jewish interview into Google, and it'll pop up. It is the most surreal hour of any interview I've ever seen in my life. After the whole Nick Rogan scandal happened, after Nick Rogan started talking about Jews and how much he dislikes Jews, he is, of course, a disciple of Louis Farrakhan, who's a big Jew hater, an old-time Jew hater, a Jewish actor on another Jewish comedian's podcast decided to attack Israel. Now, we have to understand the context, because context is always important. So you have to understand the context. Mark Maron, who was interviewing Seth Rogen, who was the actor, Mark Maron is a Jew who hates Jews. Routines. He is not a Jew-loving Jew. He is a Jew-hating Jew, and he stokes the concept that Jews are bad people and that Judaism is a stupid religion. And this is the theme of his comedy routine. This is what he grew up in Canada, and he went to Jewish day school in Canada, went to Jewish camps. He is identifiably a Jew, and he admits to being a Jew, and he doesn't hate Judaism per se. Now, he said he was fed a huge amount of lies about Israel as a young Jewish person when he was going to Jewish day school in Canada. Now, he attended Jewish camp. It was a Zionist camp, and his parents met on a kibbutz in Israel. And he said that the fact that Jewish state was created on land where, quote, Palestinians were living has always been omitted, end quote. So this is what else he said. He said, as a Jewish person, I was fed a huge amount of lies about Israel my entire life. He said, they never tell you that, oh, by the way, there were people there. They make it seem like it was just sitting there, like the effing doors open. Now, according to Rogan, 700,000 Palestinians were driven out of their homes or fled fighting in the 1948 war. He said those descendants make up about 5.6 million refugees. Now, they were promoting, Rogan was there to promote a new movie that he came up with called An American Pickle, which tells the story of a Jewish immigrant from the 1920s who falls into a vat of brine and wakes up in modern-day Brooklyn. Now, Rogan said, I remember my dad frankly telling me people hate Jews. Just be aware of that. They just do. And it's honestly something that I'm so glad it was instilled in me from a young age. Because if it wasn't, I would constantly be shocked at how much Jew hatred there is. He used much profaner language. I'm not going to do it. Now, he said that Zionists have pointed to the Holocaust and centuries of bloody anti-Semitism as evidence that Jews will never be safe without a state. He argued, you don't keep something you're trying to preserve all in one place. Asked if he would ever go and live in Israel, Rogan said no. And Maron, the Jewish interviewer, said, I'm the same way, and we're going to really piss off a bunch of Jews. That's the quote. No, you're not. I know that a lot of people were upset by the fact that Seth Rogen and Mark Maron were dissing Israel and were speaking out against Israel. Many people were upset about it. Many Jewish people were upset about it. I saw press releases flying back and forth from different Jewish advocacy organizations. Oh my God, could you believe Seth Rogen said this? Oh my gosh, how could he do that? At the end of the day, does it really matter? Does it really matter what Seth Rogen said, what Mark Maron said? Why should we even care? That's the question I want to ask you. Why should we even care? I don't see any reason to take the words that are said by a paid clown seriously. The man's job is to entertain. That's his job. All entertainers' jobs are entertain. They're paid clowns. They're there for our entertainment, for our enjoyment. We pay so they could entertain us. So why would I care what they think politically? Why would I care about anything they thought outside of the scripted words that they should read in order to make me laugh or to entertain me? Outside of that, why should I care at all what they think? I personally don't, but I know a lot of people do. And I think it's really sad that people put so much credence into something so trivial. What does it change anything? So Seth Rogen comes out and says that he doesn't like Israel, and he thinks that Israel is a country that stole the land from the Arabs, and that the Arabs have a legitimate right there, and he would never move there because they're a fascist state. How does that change my life or your life in any way? What Seth Rogen feels. How does that change anything for you or me? It changes nothing. It changes nothing. Maybe Seth Rogen's Jewish education wasn't so great, and I could attest to that. I taught in Jewish day schools in North America. I could attest to the fact that teaching of Zionism in North America is extremely warped. When I taught Zionism in a North American high school, I taught them about the history of Israel, the history of Zionism, the many different forms of Zionism, what the UN does, how to defend Israel, why Israel needs to be defended, the purpose of the state, and the reasons that the state was created. They fired me for teaching that. They replaced me with a guy who taught the students that if you believe that the state of Palestine is legitimate, you have the exact same legitimacy as the person who believes that the state of Israel is legitimate. And they call that course Israel Advocacy. He taught them that you could have a Jewish state and an Arab state simultaneously on the same piece of land. Maybe you have to build pillars and build an overpass or something, so one people could live on top of the other. I'm not sure how that would work, but this is what he was taught. So when I was teaching it, I was teaching authentic Zionism. I was teaching the history of Zionism. I was teaching why Zionism is important. They fired me for teaching that because I guess one rich parent got upset when their kid came home and said, "Hey, it's Jewish land, and we have to defend our Jewish land, and we have to be there, and we have to support our Jewish land," and complained to the school. That's my guess. But at the same time, if Seth Rogen was learning that that both sides have equal rights to the land, and that we should Israel's wrong for being there, and Israel is at fault for being there, then I can understand why he would have those views that he expressed. And it's more of a condemnation against the Jewish school systems in North America than it is against Seth Rogen, because I really don't care about Seth Rogen. I care about what kids are being taught in Jewish schools. I'm Howie Silberger. This is Political Hitman. We can take a little break. We'll be back just after this.
Shalom, everybody. Making a difference often takes just one moment and one person at a time. I am Orly Benny Davis, your show host on Israel News Talk Radios from Jerusalem with Love. You'll be hearing people talking about politics, religion, social issues, and making a better tomorrow. Join me, Orly Benny Davis, for God and Country. From Jerusalem with Love.
Wednesdays on Israel News Talk Radio.
Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Did you know this psalm and many others were composed by a Jewish shepherd and musician who later became a king? Would you like to know some of the inner meanings of psalms to help you connect with God and strengthen your soul? An exciting and easy-to-read book is now available which will help you do just that. Software for the Soul, Psalms for Everyone, available on Kindle, Audible, and Amazon.com. Software for the Soul.
Modesty at the beach? It isn't just about body image. It's about feeling good. Modest swimsuits, so we don't get burned by the sun.
So we won't get ogled by strangers.
So we'll feel free to express ourselves without the need to expose ourselves.
Let Marcy Modest help you to cover up what you want, how you want.
Made in Israel.
Visit marcymodest.com. That's MARSEA modest.com.
And get a 10% discount on your first purchase.
2 new shows on Israel News Talk Radio.
The return of the Jewish people to the land of Israel was prophesied in the Bible thousands of years ago and is coming true today. Shalom. Join me, Josh Wander, on Israel Unplugged. Listen in as we delve into the spiritual and physical aspects of the Jewish return to Zion. We'll discuss the biblically mandated, historic, and of course practical understandings of this incredible transition from exile to redemption. That's Israel Unplugged, every Monday on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com.
How did a nice Jewish girl from Delaware end up living in Israel? Shalom, I'm Natalie Sapinski. Join me on my show, Returning Home. Meet different people who have moved to Israel. Hear their personal stories, their highs, their lows, and everything in between. Each week, we talk to experts on immigration and the process of moving to Israel. Listen to Returning Home every Thursday, only on Israel News Talk Radio.
Political Hitman. I'm Howie Silberger, your political hitman, here on Israel News Talk Radio. Feel free to join in on the conversation. The numbers to call if you want to get in on the talk. In North America, it's 301-768-4841. In Israel, the number is 02-650-0151. So just before the break, I was telling you about my teaching experience when I was teaching a course called Israel Advocacy in a Jewish day school in North America. Now, the school was filled with Israeli teachers. They were teaching all the Judaic studies was taught in Hebrew in the school. So they taught Hebrew in Hebrew, which is unique. That school was fairly unique. Most Jewish schools in North America don't teach Hebrew subjects in Hebrew. They teach Hebrew and English. But this school here happened to teach Hebrew and Hebrew. And so all the teachers were Israelis. And I was given the course Israel Advocacy. I'm not an Israeli. I wasn't born in Israel. They were all born in Israel, and they transplanted themselves to North America, which shows just how devoted to Israel they really were. And so I started teaching the kids about the history of Zionism. I started teaching them that there are different forms of Zionism, and each form is legitimate in its own way, and that we shouldn't be scared of other Jews who are exhibiting other forms of Zionism. And we have to understand that there are different perspectives on the state of Israel within the Jewish community. And we also have to understand that that there are perspectives of Zionism outside the Jewish community. So I taught them a little bit about why there are Zionist Christians, and I taught them a little bit about everything. And as I'm teaching them, they're telling their teachers, the way kids are, they go into another class and they say, hey, did you know this? And did you know that? And the teachers, these Israeli teachers, started coming up to me and saying to me, Howie, how could you teach the kids that the Jews have a legitimate claim to the state of Israel? How could you teach the kids that it's our birthright? And when you know that there are UN resolutions saying that Israel has to move out of the West Bank, they tell me. And they use the term West Bank. I hate that term because it means nothing, first of all. And second of all, it is a term that implies that Israel is an imperialistic state, and that's not the case. So let's call things what they are. But these Israelis call it the West Bank. And how could you teach them that? And I said, well, you teach Tanakh. I don't understand how you could be asking me this question on how I could be teaching kids that the state of Israel, that Eretz Yisrael, that the land of Israel, the state of Israel, is a Jewish state when you're teaching Torah, which is the deed to the state of Israel. So I don't get it. I mean, you do teach. I asked, you do teach the kids the story of the giving of the Torah, don't you? The giving of the Jewish Bible. The Jews went up to Mount Sinai and God gave them the Bible. And she said, yeah, for sure. So, and you do teach them the story of Moses, where he marched them through the desert to get to the Holy Land, right? And she's like, yeah, I do. And I said, okay. So when God told the Jews to go to the Holy Land and told the Jews that this is your land and you are going to rule this land, does that not fit into this is our birthright and this is where we should be and this is where the Jews belong and the Jews are the indigenous people of this land? And she looked at me and said to me, that was 2,000 years ago. I'm talking about 1948. We are our own worst enemies. Jews are our own worst enemies. And Israeli Jews are even worse than lefty Israeli Jews are even worse than non-affiliated. So I looked at her and I said to her, all right, 1948. Let's go back even further than 1948. Let's go back to 1913. And so she looks at me. She said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Well, right after World War I, when the Mandate of Palestine was created by the League of Nations, and the British were given the mandate," I said to her, "Did you ever read the mandate? I mean, you talk about the Mandate of Palestine. Everyone always talks about the Mandate of Palestine. Did anyone ever read the mandate?" And she says to me, "I've never read it." I said, "Well, why don't you read it? Read the mandate. See what it says." What the Mandate of Palestine says, the League of Nations specifically gave the British the mandate to create a Jewish homeland in the land that was the Mandate of Palestine. That was the task the British were given in the mandate. Whenever anyone talks about the Mandate of Palestine, ask them what the mandate was. What was the purpose of the mandate? The purpose of the mandate was to create a Jewish state, to create a Jewish land. So you want to go back to 1948? Let's go a little further back than that. You want to talk about international law? There's international law. The British failed in their mandate. They failed in their mission that was given to them by the League of Nations. They didn't fulfill their obligation, but that was their obligation. Why are Jews called Jews? They're called Jews because they come from Judea. Where is Judea? It's in what this woman called the West Bank. I mean, how hard is this? This is not rocket science. And anybody with a semblance of history, anybody who has a minuscule knowledge of history, should be able to understand this. So the Jews were cheated out of their state by the British with the Mandate of Palestine. The land that created the mandate included Jordan and included part of Syria and included some of the other areas there. the land that was part of the mandate was split up and given to the Arab tribes that fought with the British during World War I. They promised them their own homeland, so they carved up the Jewish land to give to those Arab lands. When they alter history, and I hate when history is altered. When the Jews came in 1948 and they fought the War of Independence, the Arabs leadership told whatever Arabs were living there, and there weren't very many, but whatever Arabs were living there, the Arab leadership told them, get out, leave your homes, and when you come back, you'll come back when we defeat the Jews and you'll take theirs too. Jews didn't drive the Arab population out of the land. But that's not what's taught to Jewish day school kids. And this is why kids like Seth Rogen, who went through the Jewish day school system, didn't learn the proper history of the state of Israel. And this is why when I taught the proper history to high school students, I was fired from the job because the Israeli teachers that were there objected to the way I was teaching it. I wasn't following the Jewish Federation plan. That Arabs and Jews could live on the same land and have a homeland, and there's no conflict at all. Quite sad if you think about it. But that's the way North American kids are being raised. And that is why Jewish kids in North America are the leaders of the Israel hate movement. If you look at all the Israel hate movements, from BDS straight through to any of the other ones, you'll see that the leaders, the people in the front line, the people fighting the hardest, are former Jewish day school students who didn't learn and didn't form a connection with Israel in their Jewish education. And when I say Jewish, I use quotation marks. It's quite sad. About 15 years ago, maybe even a little more than that, the Jewish school system of North America decided to swap out Judaism for Zionism. And so Zionism became Judaism, and they became interchangeable in the schools. So that even adds more to the confusion of kids who are graduating from there, where they can't differentiate between Zionism and Judaism. So you can't blame Seth Rogen, and I know that all the articles and all the outrage over Seth Rogen's comments on this podcast was a result of people not following the "Don't make upon yourself a graven image," the second commandment, because they treat Seth Rogen like an idol. Oh, he's a movie actor, so important that his opinion really matters. But it doesn't matter. It's just indicative of the decay. And the decay comes from the top and works its way down in the North American Jewish community. It just shows the decay. And it's very sad. And it's very scary. But it's not unprecedented. Because if you remember the story, and the story they don't teach in the Jewish day schools, but if you remember the story, when Moses took the Jews out of Egypt, not all the Jews went with him. And that's really what's going to be the case here with the state of Israel. When the Jews finally, and majority of Jews are living in Israel already, but when more Jews move to Israel, the ones left behind will be eaten up by society. Either they'll be killed in pogroms and anti-Jewish actions, or they'll just assimilate so much, and it's already happening, that they're just going to disappear into the masses. And a third of the Jewish population will be left, and that third will be committed to Judaism, or some semblance of Judaism, or at least know and understand that they're Jewish, and understand their place and the place of Israel in the world. I know it's a terrible prediction. It's a terrible thing to say, and it hurts me that I have to say these things. But when you look and you watch and you study the situation and you understand the situation, you realize that we are raising generations of children who don't understand Judaism and only understand Zionism from a very, very, very leftist point of view. And if that's the case, then there's really very little hope that any of these kids coming out of Jewish day schools will be strong Zionists, strong Jews. So sad. We'll be right back. I'm Howie Silberger. This is Political Hitman on Israel News Talk Radio.
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
This is Shai Bentako, and each week I'll be webcasting to you from Judea, origin of the word Jew, a people besieged and beleaguered in every generation. Nazi Germany's but a memory, but in its place the world invented the phantom Palestinians as this generation's internationally authorized Jew killers. Tune in for a different slant on life in Israel, Phantom Nation, every Monday.
Hi, I'm Rabbi David Aaron. The soul basics are the most profound, the most essential, and yet often the most neglected in our education. Join me for Soul Talk on Israel's News Talk Radio and discover the secrets to love, spiritual growth, and personal power.
How did a nice Jewish girl from Delaware end up living in Israel? Shalom, I'm Natalie Sapinski. Join me on my show, Returning Home. Meet different people who have moved to Israel. Hear their personal stories, their highs, their lows, and everything in between. Each week, we talk to experts on immigration and the process of moving to Israel. Listen to Returning Home every Thursday, only on Israel News Talk Radio.
Political Hitman. I'm Howie Sobiger, your political hitman. Join me in the chat room by going to IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com, clicking on that chat room button. Joining me in the chat room. You can call in North America. The number is 301-768-4841. In Israel, the number is 0265000151. Those numbers are available on the top of the page on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. And the conversation is always interesting in the chat room, as it is today. So feel free to go to the chat room and join me on the air on Israel News Talk Radio. Joe Biden, the Democratic nominee for president, announced his running mate yesterday. His running mate is going to be a woman named Kamala Harris. Now, Kamala Harris is married to a Jewish guy. No, it's not that's relevant, but this is what I've been reading. So let me tell you what I've been reading, because it's totally irrelevant. You know, the stuff they're saying about her is totally irrelevant, and this is what I'm reading: that she's a Black Asian woman, first Black Asian woman to be nominated for vice president of the United States of America, and that her husband is Jewish, so he'll be the first Jewish first vice husband, I guess. I don't know, and that she spent time in Canada as in high school in Canada, and she was a lawyer, and she was and on and on. Okay, fine. I find the coverage very interesting, because here we are going through, aside from the COVID-19 pandemic that we're going through, we're also going through this political strife where Black Lives Matter and this political correctness rage where you can't say certain things, or you're going to get canceled. You can't say certain things, or they're going to come after you. We're going through this era. It's a really strange era, but we're going through this era. And then I remember not long ago, people were telling me, well, you can't say that you're male, and you can't say you're female. Gender doesn't exist. And they were saying, and you can't say you're white or black. Color doesn't exist. And then the second Kamala Harris gets nominated, the first thing they're saying is, oh my God, a black woman got nominated for mind-blowing, a black woman. Well, which one is it? Which one is it? Where does it go? I mean, does the political correct world exist, or has that disappeared? I've lost track of the rules. I've lost track of the rules of society, because they keep changing. It's a shifting goalpost. And every time something happens, it shifts. And you kind of lose track of it. And you don't know what you can or can't say anymore in this politically correct world we live in. So nobody comes and attacks you and kills you because you said the wrong thing. I don't care if Kamala Harris is black. I don't care if she's Asian. I don't care if she's Jewish. I don't care if she's a woman. I don't care if she's a man. I don't care if she's a monkey. I don't care if she's a donkey. I don't care if she's an elephant or whatever she wants to identify as. I don't care. It's irrelevant to me. You know what I care about when it comes to a politician? And I don't know if I'm the only person in the world who cares about this, but this is what I care about when it comes to politicians. Number one, are they qualified to do the job? Do they have the experience and the skills needed to do the job? That's criteria number one. Criteria number two, are they qualified to do the job? Everything outside of that question number one and question number two, which, if you're paying attention, was the same question, is the only thing that matters to me. I don't care if you're a white man. I don't care if you're a black woman. I don't care if you're a transvestite. It doesn't matter to me. If you're transgender, whatever you are, don't matter. Are you qualified to do the job? If you are qualified to do the job, and you are the best candidate, the most qualified candidate to do the job, then everything else should be irrelevant and you should get the job. If you are not the most qualified person to do the job, then somebody more qualified than you should get the job. Period. That is the criteria that should be applied to every politician in any case. What are your policies? What do you believe in? What have you fought for? What have you opposed? What laws have you promoted? What experience do you have in doing this type of position? The same kind of questions that you would ask a guy who came in to sell for you are the same questions you would ask this person. And if the qualifications were good, then you vote for them. If you agreed with their political point of view, their political stand, their political perspective, you vote for them. Do I care if she has a Jewish husband? How's that relevant to anything? Do I care if she's been sleeping around? Do I care if she's a moral person, if she's an ethical person? Totally irrelevant. The only thing I care about is she capable of doing the job, and is she capable? I will add a little addendum to that. Is she capable of doing the job? And is she capable of doing the job without defrauding the American people? Those are my only two questions. Everything else, for me, is completely irrelevant. Now, I would never vote Democrats because I don't believe in the Democratic point of view. I think the Democratic Party has become a lefty party, and leftyism is the scariest phenomenon in the history of the world. So I would never vote Democrat. But like I said, if you were going to vote Democrat or you're going to even vote Republican, that's the question you have to ask. Are you capable of doing the job? Are you qualified to do the job? Do you have the experience to do the job? Once again, it doesn't seem like rocket science, but people don't seem to understand this. And if you say, oh my gosh, I'm voting for her because I want to see the first black woman as vice president of the United States, well, then you're a racist. You're a racist and a sexist. Because you should not be voting for somebody based on their skin color. That's racism. It's the definition of racism. And if you're voting her because she's a woman, that's the definition of sexism, isn't it? If I don't hire you because you're male, I'm a sexist. If I don't hire you because you're a female, I'm a sexist. If I vote for you because you're a male, I'm a sexist. If I vote for you because you're female, I'm a sexist. If I vote for you because you're white, then I'm a racist. If I vote for you because you're black, I'm also a racist. Let's just get things straight. Let's understand. Let's hold a standard for everybody. I know the standard shifts. It's a shifting standard when it comes to racism and when it comes to sexism. Only certain people could be racist and other people can't be racist, and certain colors are more important than other colors. This is a strange world we live in. It's a really strange world we live in. But nobody at all looks at a politician and says to a kid, I want you to grow up to be just like that person. Nobody at all looks at their kid and says that. A kid might look up and say, I want to be president of the United States one day, and that's why the office has to be sanctified. But nobody says, I want to be Donald Trump one day. Nobody. Because nobody thinks Donald Trump is a moral person. And if you do, then you're deluded. I might think Donald Trump is a great president, and I really do think he's been an awfully good president over the last 4 years. But do I think he's a moral person? Absolutely not. But he has done the job very competently for the last 4 years. Do I think that Would I want Donald Trump to be hanging around my kids or grandkids? No, not at all. Would I want Donald Trump to be part of my family? No. But once again, that has nothing to do with his service as president, with his performance as the president of the United States. He's been very good. Would I want Joe Biden around my kids? Absolutely not. He was a senator. He was actually a fairly decent senator, but unfortunately, as he got older, I think that his competency has dropped a lot. If you watch his speeches, sometimes they just make no sense. That's been happening an awful long time. So would he be a competent president? In my opinion, in my perspective, probably not. In other people's perspectives, maybe, but that's what democracy is all about. I can vote for who I want to vote for. You could vote for who you want to vote for, and that's why it's called democracy. Everybody has one vote per person. But don't come tell me that you're voting for someone because they're Jewish, or you're voting for someone because they're married to a Jewish guy, or you're voting for someone because they're a woman, or you're voting for someone because they're a man, or you're voting for someone because they're black or white or green or yellow or purple. That's not the reason to choose a candidate. Unfortunately, we live in a superficial world. We live in a world where people make judgment calls based on appearance rather than on substance, and that is due to a lack of education. That is due to the materialistic society we've built. It's due to the abundance of televisions in homes and the true flighty nature of television programming. It's due to the political messages sent through television programming. There are many, many reasons why people behave the way they behave. And one day we should do a show on this, on how media has created this world that we live in today, and how maybe one day media could help destroy this world, because this is not the world that we should be living in. It's a very strange and odd and weird world. Maybe we should do a show on that one day, because I think it would be interesting to talk about that. When I see somebody saying Black Lives Matter and wearing a Che Guevara T-shirt, it kind of scares me a little bit, because history is not being taught, and it's just so strange. The world we live in is just so strange. So what's the moral lesson we learn? It's quite simple. We have to watch what we say, and we have to understand that celebrities are superficial, empty people. And being superficial, empty people means that we shouldn't take what they say seriously, and we should really not pay much attention to the opinions of celebrities. And those of us that rely on celebrities for our political perspective, those of us who rely on celebrities for our news and our political points of view, well, then you're shallow too. And that's a really sad state. I'm Howie Silberger. This is Political Hitman. I will see you again next week right here on Israel News Talk Radio.
Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. Just click the orange button at the top of the IsraelNewsTalkRadio.home page, log in as yourself or an anonymous guest, and join in on the fun. You'll meet other listeners from all over the world who listen to Israel News Talk Radio, and you can make new friends. Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. It's the closest you can get to being in the studio with us.
We love listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Where can you get the inside news on Israel? At Israel News Talk Radio, we're dedicated to sharing Israel's inside story with the world by providing our listeners with news on Israeli politics, current affairs, and Israeli Jewish culture. The Israel News Talk Radio homepage also provides you, the listener, with useful information at your fingertips, with scrolling news headlines, weather, currency exchange, Shabbat candlelighting times, and so much more. Our radio programming is always accessible and on demand. We operate absolutely free of charge for everyone, everywhere. If you love what we do, partner with us now by becoming an Israel News Talk Radio supporter. With your support, you'll be inscribed on our Israel News Talk Radio Wall of Fame. There's nothing like us in the world. Be part of something great. Israel News Talk Radio. Straight talk from Israel.
If you love Israel News Talk Radio, then you'll love our Facebook page. We keep you up to date on what's happening in Israel, plus little surprise treasures that we don't share on the radio. Go now to follow us on Facebook. Just look for the Israel News Talk Radio Facebook page, and don't forget to subscribe and follow us by clicking on the like button. We post great stuff there that you'll want to share. Israel News Talk Radio on Facebook and Israel News Radio on Twitter.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.